Thanks for joining us tonight. My name is Tammy Fitzgerald, and I'm the founder and executive director of the North Carolina Values Coalition. Most of you already know me, but for those of you who don't, I'm an attorney, a wife, a mother, a grandmother of 4, and just a citizen, actually. But our world has completely changed this last few weeks dramatically because of the global pandemic and economic crisis that we're all going through, which really has affected every one of us. And since we cannot gather together anymore, either for meetings or events or at church, we're going to have a new way to meet, and that's virtually via these virtual meetings. And so this is our first of many virtual conversations to stay in touch with you and to introduce you to some of our valued allies. And we plan to use this format to keep you informed on our issues of life, family, and religious freedom. We'll introduce you to some of our fine elected officials who are courageously representing our Christian values that we hold dear, both in Raleigh and in Washington. Now I'd like to introduce our special guest, Congressman Greg Murphy from Greenville, who represents the 3rd Congressional District. Good evening, Greg.
Good evening. Thank you so much for having me.
He's also a former member of the North Carolina State House, and I worked closely with him when he was in the House, and I just thank him for his many years of public service. Thank you so much.
Very kind. Thank you so much. It was my honor to serve.
Last summer, when we were battling the governor on the Abortion Survivors Protection Act, Congressman Murphy delivered a very powerful stand for life on the North Carolina House floor. And he was speaking in favor of the bill and against Governor Cooper's veto. So during tonight's conversation, if you have a question, please send it to us, email it to info@ncvalues.org, or drop a question on Facebook or Zoom. Well, welcome, Congressman Murphy, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Which title do you prefer? I just wanted to know. You worked so hard to get the MD title. Do you prefer Congressman or Doctor?
You know, Tammy, when I wake up in the morning and I look in the shower, or look in the mirror rather, I still see a doctor. That's what I've been for over 30 years. And so to be honest with you, I consider myself a doctor, a physician serving in Congress. So my office staff in DC, everybody else calls me Dr. Murphy, and that's best who I respond to. But I'm honored to have either one, but to be honest with you, I'm just Greg. So
that's wonderful. Well, thank you. Well, let's talk about what's on everyone's mind first. Would you give us an update on the COVID-19 pandemic? And specifically in North Carolina, we continue to see the numbers of cases climb in many of our counties. What does this mean, and what advice do you have for members of our coalition?
Well, I think we're facing an infection, or a pandemic rather, that we've never had in our lifetimes. We're dealing with a virus that's 10 times more infective than the flu virus, and especially given the fact we have no vaccine, it's up to 10 times more lethal. And so it's easily spread, and it can easily take the life of susceptible individuals. And it's essentially, and I hope temporarily, literally changed the way that we face life and that we get up every day thinking about things. Where we are medically, by far the greatest intervention that we can do, again, since there are no medicines, since there are no vaccines, is social distancing. This is how we come together, by staying apart. You know, how long we're able to do that, or we need to do that, is the big question. When do we take our foot off the brake and start letting us come back to some semblance of normalcy, is a great question. There'll be debates on either side. But at this point in time, there are basically 3 pots of individuals, and this will be the case for the next good period. One is you hunker down, you isolate, and you wait for a vaccine and you recover. 2 is if you get it and recover either at home or in a hospital, or if you're unfortunately unlucky enough, this disease can take people's lives. So this is an hour-by-hour charting of waters that we've never navigated before. And you know, patience and love is hope, really what we are thinking about the most. I think this week, especially during Holy Week, we have to think about the hope of the resurrection. And we try to put that in perspective with what we're dealing with today.
What a great perspective. Yes, to put it in light of the cross and what Jesus suffered for us. I like that you brought back that. Well, the government just appropriated trillions of dollars for payments to most Americans, and they expanded unemployment insurance and assistance for corporations and small businesses and nonprofits. Could you give us an update on the rollout of these assistance programs and what it means for North Carolina families?
Sure. This was a program that we, after something got passed on a bipartisan manner in the Senate, we hit a wall with Speaker Pelosi, and a lot of things that had nothing to do with the COVID crisis were attempted to be put in. Fortunately, 95% of that was kept out. Some things like money for the Kennedy Center in New York was put in there, which has nothing to do with the coronavirus epidemic. But $2 trillion was allocated, not for a stimulus. It's very important. People need to understand this. It's for stabilization of our economy, hopefully for the next 2 months, until we're actually able to get a much better handle on this. And what this has been done in large part is to try to help small businesses because they've been shuttered for one reason or another, and try to get them through that period. I just was on a conference call with one of our small business leaders in Congress, and if you can imagine what is normally taking the federal government, or any government for that matter, a year to 2 years to put a program in place, we've done in a week. And as one can expect, there are glitches, there are utilization problems, there are a lot of problems with lenders not understanding what they're able to do, but a lot of people have been helped. The real question a lot of folks have is the money going to run out of trying to help small businesses? And by some calculations, we'll reach a shortfall next week. This is why most likely there will be a fourth package to help get further monies to try to stabilize our small businesses.
Well, it sure is a lot of assistance for people, and I hope that people can figure out how to take advantage of it. Is there any advice that you want to give families? Is there anything they need to do to receive their coronavirus assistance check from the government?
Well, if you have filed a tax return, and again, as an individual, it's $75,000 and you'll get $1,200. It's prorated up to a maximum of $99,000. If you're in a family, that money goes up to about $150,000 and then tapers off. And so, if you file taxes, that will automatically come to you. I've had a lot of messages sent to me about, well, I'm on Social Security, or I'm on Social Security disability, but I haven't made enough money to file taxes. Those monies, again, since you already have kind of a file with the government, that money will be coming to you separately. If you're in that third bucket where you're not on Social Security and you've not filed a tax return previous in 2019, we're asking you to go ahead and file a return for 2019, even if you don't owe any money. But we're asking you to file a return so you get logged into the system with the IRS, so those monies and the stimulus, or not the stabilization check rather, will be sent to you.
That's great news and good advice. So where can small business owners go if they need help?
We're asking the small business owners to go to the banks with whom that they have a relationship, and to go to their local community bank or go to the larger banks of our nation, because if they have a relationship with them already, that bank already has their information. What we're finding is that a lot of banks are willing to only work with individuals who have a loan with them first and try to get them at the front of the queue. There are a lot of folks in the line, and one can understand that a little bit. Banks want to make sure that the people who owe them money remain solvent, but still, for that matter, they should be helping out the other individuals that have relationships with them. And for individuals that don't have a relationship with a bank, which if you're a small business, that's a little bit, that should be a rare thing. We're asking them to persist, to call banks, to call lenders, and try to just get in queue, get in line to get one of these business loans. It takes patience. It's a hard time. The other part of the small business loan, and just to go through that, you can get up to $10 million loaned to you. Essentially, what they're asking for is if you bring in your payroll statement from 2019 or 2018, and they will loan up to 2.5 times the amount that you have on your books each month. So they'll loan you that amount. 75% of what you are loaned to make it forgivable, to make it go away at the end of 6 months, has to be for payroll. But payroll can also include health insurance. It can include a 401k. It doesn't just have to mean money sent out and paid to other individuals. The other 25% can be interest on mortgages, can be utilities, can be rent, can be other assorted things. So again, this is money that's being given essentially by the federal government to stabilize small businesses. It comes in the form of a loan, but if you fulfill the requirements, which are fairly easy, at the end of 6 months, the loan will be forgiven. And hopefully by that period of time, we're back to normalcy. You've kept your employees on the payroll so that when we're through this immediate crisis, you won't have to go out and hire a bunch of new people, train a bunch of new people that will have a ready to go workforce.
You know, it's pretty unusual for people in our coalition who are largely conservatives to want help from the government. But as I hear what you're saying, it sounds like this is in order for businesses to remain open and keep their employees employed.
Yes, ma'am. And you know, small business is the cornerstone of our nation. It's the mom and pops that have worked their entire life to keep a business open. And you know, we try to prepare for so many eventualities, but this is one that we essentially, you know, nobody can prepare for. And I've said this many times: the nation was not ready to go to war against Japan on December the 8th, 1941. And so, I think our administration has done an excellent job of trying to literally do this together on the fly. But these are difficult times, but we want our small businesses to stay intact so that when we're through this, hopefully within the next 6 to 8 weeks, that we can crank back up again and get the greatest economy in the world to go back on again.
Well, we're thankful for congressmen like you, Congressman Murphy, who are looking out for small business owners and helping to keep people employed during this very difficult time.
Well, it's my honor. It's a service. It's not easy. I really feel for individuals that have worked so hard and then overnight their businesses are in jeopardy. But we're asking them to remain faithful, to try to be patient, and try to work through this. This is hard, but we can do it. I think we can as Americans.
Last month, President Trump had hoped that Easter would be a target goal where restrictions on church services and other public gatherings would be lifted. But now it looks like Easter will be a virtual holiday for all of us and our churches will be empty. How do we know when it's safe to return to worship together and to work?
That's one of the biggest questions I'm not sure there's a perfect answer for. You know, the president was criticized because he said he was going to open things up too soon. But, you know, it's incumbent upon leaders, in my opinion, that you give the people that you represent, you give them hope. And that's what the president's done. Now, that's tempered with reality, and it's tempered with being able to change plans. But what a beautiful symbol that the hope is in the resurrection, and that at time of Easter, we would have hope back again for our country. Now, we've obviously had to change that a little bit, but I think it was a great symbolic statement to try to say this is where we're going as a country, and this is where maybe we can relive and come back up again for our country.
Loved the timing of that statement.
Yeah.
It's quite ironic that the peak week for this COVID virus is during the week of Easter. Yeah. And I'm not sure what to think about that, if there's some spiritual significance to that, but it is really sobering to think that we're going through the hardest time in this pandemic during the week before and after Easter. And so I'm grateful that we have people like you in Congress who have faith and who are worshiping God and asking Him for mercy in our country this time. One question I've got about masks. You know, the CDC started out telling all of us that masks were not important. And last week they issued new guidance encouraging us all to wear masks whenever we go out, in addition to social distancing. So if you can't find a mask to wear, what should you do?
Well, the whole idea behind masks, and this is the original thought, is that there was a short supply of them. Again, we weren't ready to supply a nation of 300+ million people with masks. Is that they should be kept for the healthcare workers, the ones, the N95s, the ones that are really, really super as far as preventing particles from coming in. But the other masks were meant if somebody was sick, to prevent them, if they're coughing or sneezing, from really spreading the virus. And so if you're not able to get access to a mask, any covering, cloth covering primarily is something going over your mouth and your nose is thought to do a couple things. Just prevent you from, if God forbid you're one of the people that's carrying the virus that's asymptomatic, because we're finding out so many people who've actually been infected, but they just didn't know it. So they're actually shedding virus also, not as a higher rate as someone who's been symptomatic, but those individuals still can spread the virus. The other thing is, it really, again, any protective barrier, if God forbid someone were to cough or sneeze or aerosolize something that get into in your mouth or in your nose. The other thing is touching surfaces. We know now that this virus, although it's kind of a wimpy virus, it's not a very strong virus, can still stay alive on certain surfaces for a small period of time. And if you're touching something and then touching your face, it's another mode of transmission. I will tell you this, in some theories, those carry some water, but the other thing is that if you see someone with mask, all of a sudden you're reminded again, constantly reminded, okay, don't touch my face, don't touch that surface. So it's a good reminder, and then in and of itself, that's a good means of decreasing the transmission.
That's good advice. Thank you. Thank you. One of the things that I learned when we were setting up this call is that you're still practicing medicine. Yeah. And yesterday you were in the hospital doing surgery and attending to patients. And so what is that like, practicing medicine while you're in Congress? Is it hard?
It's very hard. They make every rule and regulation to try to prevent that. Primarily, I'm not sure why. I think that, our founding fathers wanted us to come out of our lives and represent people and go back into our lives. I spent a long time studying in school and working very, very hard to become a surgeon. I love what I do. I love my patients. I think they like me as their physician. And so there's a law in Congress where I'm not allowed to earn any money as a physician practicing. I'm only allowed to pay my malpractice and keep my license going. But that doesn't matter to me. I've done mission work around the world for 35 years. I still love taking care of patients. And it helps me also, to be very honest with you, maintain relevance. If I'm going to be representing some doctors' needs and healthcare needs for the nation, and I'm in the thick of things, I can really speak with authority. So on many different levels, it's good for me to get back to my roots and to stay in constant contact with those of us and my colleagues who take care of people.
I can see how that would be true. I can't believe you're doing it as a missionary. That's admirable. That's wonderful. Well, is there anything else you wanted to say before I go to a few questions from the audience?
I just want to say that this is a time of great stress. We're being told to stay apart from one another, and that's, especially here in the South, that's kind of hard to do. We're a communal group of people. But there's a purpose in all this suffering. Just as Christ went through his suffering for our sins, there's a purpose in all this. We may not know it now. God has a plan in all of this, and I really think at some point we'll understand that. But patience is really the biggest challenge that it is for me, that to keep through all doing this. So I just want people to stay safe, to understand that there is a reason for doing all what we're trying to do.
That's good advice. It's hard to stay away from the ice cream store, though, isn't it? Oh, well, let's take a few questions from our audience tonight. Let me see. Before the special election, you had the opportunity to stand on the stage with President Trump at ECU. Since that rally, have you had opportunity to talk with the president or work with his new chief of staff, Mark Meadows?
I have. I've actually had the great joy of being on Air Force One a couple times now, traveling with the president to different localities. I tell you, the president's a very, very personable person. He says things sometimes that I may not say, but he's not a politician, and it's been a joy working for him. I think he truly cares about this country. He wouldn't put up with all the nonsense if he didn't. And so it's been good. And, Congressman Meadows, our former Congressman Meadows, is now his chief of staff. And I joked with him the other day that he sure picked an interesting time to become chief of staff of the president. And he just kind of rolled his eyes. And so it's been a challenge. But we have good people in Washington, D.C. We need to keep them there, in my opinion, and support them.
I think God knew the nation needed Mark Meadows in that seat at the beginning of this pandemic, don't you?
God makes good choices. So.
Well, here's another question. Is there anything that each of us can do to help boost our immune system to help fight the virus if we're exposed to it?
Yeah, I think a lot of folks have that on their mind. A lot of folks have it on it regularly, folks that are really concerned about their health. I will tell you, one person often told me that we in the United States have the most expensive urine in the world. In other words, we take the most supplements. Um, I'm going to distill it down to things that we know rather than things we don't know. I think that if we just take a multivitamin every day, go out in the sun, get some fresh air and sunshine, that's known to boost the body. Exercise if you're able, and just try to eat healthily. All the supplements in the world, to be honest with you, a lot of them just have no efficacy. They've never been proven to do anything. And I'm one of those physicians, I'm a skeptic at first. You have to prove it to me that it works before I'm going to recommend something. So to be honest with you, sunshine, good eating, and a multivitamin is my recipe for having the best immune system.
Great. I'm right on track.
That's great. And ice cream's kind of good too every once in a while.
Yes, once in a while.
Moderation in everything, including moderation, right?
Yes. And finally, here's another question. I remember all the challenges North Carolina had with absentee ballots in 2018. I'm very concerned about the vote by mail and other changes Nancy Pelosi and even Democrats here in North Carolina are pushing. What do you think about these proposals to change voting in November?
I am adamantly against everybody voting by mail. There's already an absentee ballot structure in place if people are not able to get to the voting booth. And I think this is very unfortunate that Speaker Pelosi has tried to take advantage of this crisis, essentially to push her agenda, which has nothing to do with this crisis itself. And she delayed the third bill for 4 days, trying to get, in my opinion, which was a bunch of nonsense in the bill that had nothing to do with this crisis. It was about climate change. It was about outlawing voter ID in the country. A lot of different things. We need to stick with what we know is right. We're not at any point right now where we need to mail in ballots. And to be honest with you, you talk about risk of voter fraud. That would go through the roof if you have no way to identify that person being able to send in that particular ballot. That is fraught with peril, and I think she would love that. So adamantly against it.
Thank you, Congressman Murphy. From impeachment and new trade deals to the current coronavirus crisis, you've been historically active since arriving in Washington. And as we conclude, I was just wondering how you and your family are adjusting to life in Washington, D.C.
I think we're doing okay. I'm in D.C. about 60% of the time, but I come back and I race back home to North Carolina to come back to reality. I will tell you, some people, and I can understand this now, get caught up in the reality being Washington. In my opinion, the reality is not Washington. It is Eastern North Carolina. It's North Carolina, and that's where we love. My wife has been actually up. She actually helps in the office some. She's a volunteer. She's not on any type of pay staff, but she's helped a lot with constituents and helping us recognize people in the district who are far and above worthy individuals. So it's been good. We've made a transition, and we've made some friends, and I think we're doing well.
How can we be praying for you and our nation?
I think it's important that people realize that even though we're elected officials, we're human too. We have our frailties. I have my challenges. I have my questions. I have my why am I doing this moments. Because it can be very frustrating. You see some people who, in my opinion, don't have the country at heart, have their own interests at heart. So I would just ask people to pray for patience. I would ask them to pray for discernment. I would ask them to pray for strength, not only physical strength, but spiritual strength, psychological strength, because it is a grind. It is a grind. And unless you really see the big picture, which I've always really tried to do, you can get caught with what's right in front of you and be paralyzed by that. So I think looking at the big picture, and just praying that we just try to always discern what God has for us in every day's work it would be really deeply appreciated.
Thank you again, Congressman Murphy, for your time and for this helpful information. We're grateful for your service to our nation at such a time as this. The most defenseless Americans, the unborn, are truly blessed to have a congressman like you advocating for them. May God bless you with great wisdom and insight as you serve our nation in the House of Representatives. Thank you for that. May God bless you and your wisdom with wisdom and insight as you lead us in DC.
Thank you so much.
In closing, please save the date, Tuesday, October 6th. We are planning our second annual celebration of Carolina values, and we'll have a powerhouse speaker that night, Gianna Jessen, who is an actual survivor of abortion. It says that on her birth certificate, that she was born as the result of an abortion. We recognize our nation is in crisis right now, but we're so hopeful that America will soon recover and that by October 6th, we can gather together again and celebrate at the Angus Barn Pavilion. In this time of uncertainty, many nonprofits will suffer financially. And if you are able, NC Values Coalition really needs your support to continue our work. Our focus, as you know, has been on promoting life, family, and religious liberty. And this year in 2020, we'll be doing that by helping to elect candidates like Congressman Murphy, who will stand with us. So if you stand with us, would you please pray about making a donation to us this month? Lastly, if you aren't signed up for our very popular weekly email called the Friday Five, you may do so on our website at ncvalues.org. We'll be in touch soon about our next video conference when we'll have someone from the Billy Graham Evangelistic Association as our special guest. May God bless you and your family. Even though we're socially distant from each other, our hearts are near. Thank you so much for watching. See you next time.